the truth hidden. You see, this truth was hidden from us to deceive us and for us to be lowly people.
Right? Because America has never told us your history. They have never told you anything that's going to benefit you as a person. They have never told you anything that's going to benefit you spiritually.
America became so rich off of 400 years of free labor. That's right. Let's be real here. America had 400 years of God's people serving.
But there's prophecy that's unfolding. Everything that's coming to pass within the scriptures is being unveiled. So you need to know what's going on in these last days and times.
Talks about what the gospel, when it talks about what the gospel is, it's good news and good tidings. But the thing about that is, it's preached and given unto a certain people, because when you talk about the gospel, it has to fit the accurate description of being given to a brokenhearted, a forsaken, and much more importantly, a people that are lost. So when you have to consider that the entire world can't be lost, or much more importantly, can't be forsaken or forgotten about, if it's given unto someone that has to fit that description. And these days and times, black men and Hispanic men and Native American people fit the description of criminals, they fit the description of gangbangers, they fit the description of everything derogative underneath the sun. But you know what the sad part is, right? They don't fit the description of being God's people. Or you've never thought that they could be, but yet when you read these scriptures, they can't be applied to anybody else but these same groups of people that I've just mentioned. The 12 tribes of Israel, as this chart here depicts, is not just a race, but it represents a race, nationality, and groups of people that are collectively made up of 12 tribes, which are known as the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, because we are set to show our people their transgressions and their sins, it's not that we're out here for anything but for the reason and the fact that we are trying to gather the lost sheep of the house of Israel, man. What you have to need and what you have to open up your ears onto is the fact that everything going on pertaining to current events, pertaining to the prophecies in Matthew 24 that Christ gave unto his disciples, is because these are what's going to happen and occur and take place before his evident return.
That's
because
right.
we are in need of divine intervention, man. If this place continues for another 5 to 10 years, we don't know what's to come, man, because we don't see but by the signs that are given within the scriptures of what's to come in these last days and times. There's a man by the name of Tyrone B. Hayes that did an experiment with frogs with a certain chemical called atrazine that's found in a lot of the weed that a lot of you are smoking today. But you know what you don't know about? That chemical, when he did his experiment with frogs, turned a lot of the male frogs into the opposite sex, being females. A lot of the male frogs wanted to mate with other male frogs, and some of the male frogs just ended up blatantly becoming females. But how many of you know that and are aware of that? How about the Tulsa race riot that just, the 100th anniversary that just occurred this past Tuesday? I can't normally wake up and rejoice and be glad to the Lord celebrating another year of life that he's given me, because I have to remember that 300 or much more people were killed on that day. And guess what? Over how much blocks and homes were destroyed because one woman cried out rape that never happened. No evidence, no proof, and she didn't want to speak out against it because it didn't happen. And guess what happened? People lost their homes. People had to live in tents. People had to dwell inside the hoods. We had to live amongst rivers of water just to hide for our lives. But how many of you know that, and how many of you are aware of the history that's happened, man? We have to consider our Hispanic and our native brethren, because there's an unknown history of Mexicans being lynched that we don't talk about enough. How the signs in the past said no Negroes, no dogs, no Mexicans. To the fact that you've been classified with the animal just to show you how lowly of an estate that you're in this present day of time, and then you think that this society, this system cares about you. Well, guess what? If that was the case, then you wouldn't have been so lowly classified to the point where you're now 3/5 of a human being. But guess what? Because you're that low in society, and because you actually think that you're eventually going to get a come up, you actually think that you're doing something. There's this author that made a book called The Miseducation of the Negro. You know what he talks about? He talks about the two different classes of Negroes, the ones that are educated and the ones that are uneducated trying to get the come up. The educated Negroes don't want to associate themselves with the uneducated Negroes because they think that they're not fit for society. They'll never make it, as they quote unquote say. They'll never reach the pinnacles or the heights of reaching what America calls the American dream. You got your family, your 2 to 5 kids, you got a home, you got a nice big yard, green grass, nice big backyard, everything you can imagine and dream up, big white fence, neighborhood is secure. You think that that's the standard of just life. You think that God just made human beings sleep, wake up, coffee, work, go home, sleep, eat, poop, wake up and do the same thing over and over again and work 9 to 5 all week. God did not make you to do that. God did not create you to be that because he made you for his will and his purpose. Get Isaiah 43:7, please. Go ahead and read Jeremiah 28:8.
This is Jeremiah chapter 28, verse 8. The prophets that have been before me and before thee have all prophesied both against many countries and against great kingdoms, of war and of evil and of pestilence. The prophets were prophesied of peace. When the word of the prophet shall come to pass, then shall the prophets be known that the Lord had truly sent him.
So it's only when you see those signs coming to pass that you'll know the times that you're living in, because the Lord told you to be circumspect. Circum includes a circle which is 360 degrees, or a sphere, excuse me, or necessarily you're looking roundabout all about where it is that you are or you're going. Or much more importantly, you're paying attention to the things going on inside the world. You know that India has spiked with coronavirus cases, and guess what? All the idols that they worship cannot save them.
That's right.
To the point where comedically in a YouTube clip, you can watch a man bulldozing all their idols and getting rid of them because they're not helping them. Things that have no breath and things that have no life cannot save you, but the Lord our power, man.
That's
and I'm
right.
speaking to my Israelite fellow brethren because this gospel is for you. When it says the gospel preached to the broken and poor-hearted, he's talking about those that are not able to save themselves out of their own predicaments. Why? Because you were put here for servitude for a 400-year plus bondage, man. That cannot be applied unto any other nation under heaven. Get Daniel chapter 9 and verse 11. Because he emphasizes saying no other nation has endured or went through the things that Jerusalem has. That being the 12 tribes of Israel, man. No people can endure what we have. No people can talk about how 100 million of them were slaughtered and killed off their own homeland, and every single year they make an anniversary about it concerning it being a dinner. But yet those same foods are symbolic of everything that they've done unto the native peoples that were here, man.
Bring it out.
They don't talk about it enough. You know why? Because they want to cover and lie up history. In Texas, guess what? There's no longer slavery. It's just indentured servants. When the Lord said that you come over here as bondmen and bondwomen, and no man is going to save you out of the predicament or the plight that you're in. Go ahead.
This is Daniel chapter 9, verse 11. Yea, all Israel have transgressed thy law, even by departing, that they might not obey thy voice. Therefore, the curse is poured upon us.
All are written inside Deuteronomy. Go ahead.
And the oath that is written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, because we have sinned against him, and have confirmed his words, which he spake against us, and against our judges that judge us, by bringing upon a great evil. For under the whole heaven has not been done, has been done upon Jerusalem.
So no other nation has endured and gone what you've gone through. You know what separates us from everybody else? You want to know what separates us from the rest of the world? You got an apocrypha? Get Ecclesiasticus chapter 40 and verse 1. Black, native, and Hispanic man, let me show you what separates you from the rest of mankind. Because you have to understand about Adam. Adam is not just Adam. Adam, according to Luke 3 and 38, was the son of God, from whom the lineage and the chosen line as the sons of God, or pre-Adamites, or proto-Adamites, if you will, who then became known as Hebrews through Eber, through the line of Shem. From Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then came the 12 tribes of Israel, who are known as the Hebrew Israelites. What you have to understand is that there's a chosen line that separates themselves and are supposed to, from, from the rest of the world. Go ahead.
This is Sirach chapter 40, verse 1. Great travail is created for every man.
So everybody through life and everybody inside this life that's living and breathing, you're going to go through hell, you're going to go through tribulation, and guess what? Not everything is always going to be so good in life for you. But here's the catch to this scripture. Go ahead.
And heavy yoke is upon the sons of Adam, from the day that they go out from their mother's womb, to the day that they return to the mother of all things.
So guess what? Great travail and the great yoke is upon the sons of Adam, these sons of God, who are the Israelites, according to Exodus 4 and 22. Thus shalt thou say unto my firstborn Israel, as Moses was commanded to speak unto Pharaoh. It wasn't talking about the rest of the world. It wasn't talking about the rest of the nations. It's just exclusively and only about Israel. The only part where other nations are included is if they're underneath Israel, and it's much more importantly for servitude. That's it. Because without the Israelites being here on earth, guess what? Nothing else exists. Just as gang members say, we don't die, we multiply, that comes from the scriptures. Because in Jeremiah 31 and 35, it talks about how we are numbered as the sands of the sea and as the stars of the sky.
Bring it out!
That's where that comes from. You know why? Because the much more they try to kill you, guess what? It's the much more you grow. It's no different than in the time of Egypt, back in the book of Exodus, when the much more they oppressed us is the much more we grew in number. The much more you oppress us is that much more that we're going to grow in number. You know why? Because that's God's mercy and grace to the rest of the world. Without the Israelites, without my chosen people, none of this exists for any other reason. Without them being here on this earth, guess what? You don't have a purpose. They are the sun, the moon, and the stars, because their existence and them being here, dwell upon the earth, is tied into it. That's how important you are. Stop thinking that you're a criminal, you're a gangbanger, you're a lowlife. You're not any of those things, but what God has called you, that being the children of Israel, man. All throughout the book, Israel mine elect, Israel my chosen. That's your title. That's who you are. Why? Because you are those same people that descend from those ancient men.
That's right.
So in these last days and time, it's time to pay attention to the things that are going on, because clearly all across the world pertaining to these natural disasters that Christ prophesied to, telling his disciples, he said great earthquakes, famines, plagues. Those plagues are not entirely specific, but you can see the plagues, meaning catastrophes and pestilence, the Lord is sending all throughout the earth, man. That's right. California's drought is no joke. It is no joke because it's still on fire as I am currently speaking because of how much rain has not been there in that extended period of time. There's golf ball-sized hail falling in different parts of Europe. There's still wildfires still covering acres of land in different forests all across parts of the earth. But nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about the fact that, why is this going on? Why is this happening? Much more importantly, what's to come with these things that are currently happening in this present day and time? You know why you're supposed to know the past? Because knowing the past is going to help you know the future. Knowing your future is going to show you what's to come and what you should expect. So with what's to come and what you should expect, you know what you should do? You should look well towards your goal so that you know how to walk and how to move. Get Ephesians chapter 5 and 15. You got a precept? Go ahead, Al.
This is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 31, verse 35. Thus saith the Lord, which giveth the sun for light by day, and the ordinance of the moon and of the stars for light by night, which divideth the sea when the waves thereof roar. The Lord of hosts is his name.
So, yeah, keep it.
Verse 36, if those ordinances depart from before me, saith the Lord, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me forever.
So you can see clearly how important you are when your existence is tied to the solars and the luminaries up above, right? And in understanding that, without you, there's no point of this earth being here, because all of you know without the sun, life cannot exist. Well, your existence is tied into the sun, because there's three groups of lights that govern the entire world. The sun, the moon, and the stars, which you can also include in them because they all function as one, which light up the sky at night whenever there's a new moon. And then there's a third group, the one that's spoken of in Matthew 5 and 14, when Christ said, "You are the light of the world, a city on the hill that cannot be hid." He was speaking to his disciples who are Israelites. That's right. He was not speaking unto any other people and or nation when he said that. That's the third group of lights, the much more important one that governs the entire world, because without them, nothing else would be here. Without them, nothing else would need to exist. And much more importantly, without them, the world is upside down and on its ass. You know why? Because in 2 Ezra 6 and 9, the fate of man is betwixt the heel and the hand, who was talking about Jacob and Esau. When one is in rulership, the other is beneath and under dominion. When the other is in rulership, the other one is underneath and in dominion. Well, guess what? Jacob's time and Jacob getting out of trouble is soon to come. Jacob's time and Jacob's trouble is near an end. Because Esau is the end of the world and Jacob is the beginning of it that follows. That's right. So guess what? In waking up and coming back to our people, just as we are supposed to preach, it's time to preach the gospel, the good tidings and the good news. Because our good news is their hell. This is their downfall. You could go to the richest parts of any single state, and guess who's predominantly living inside them? Edomites, the so-called Caucasian or the white man today. But where are you living at? In the ghettos, in the slums. You know exactly where Jacob is living. That's speaking on blacks and Hispanics. When you see spray paint, when you see spray paint, when you see when you smell the smoke of weed, when you smell those predominant kind of things, or you see shoes on the hay wires from the electrical poles up above, you know what kind of neighborhood you're in. You feel the whole different energy and vibe and environment when you go to Jake's neighborhood and then you go to Esau's neighborhood. You know why? Because you don't feel like you're going to lose your life. You know why? Because you feel at peace. You know why? Because you feel like walking through and just smiling for any apparent reason. But then when you come to a neighborhood such as ours, it's like, oh shoot, where am I? What's gonna happen to me? I see spray paint. I see a dude on the steps. I don't know what's gonna happen. I see someone strung out and just passed out on the sidewalk. You see the difference between ours and theirs? It's their heaven, but it's your hell. Hell does not represent fire and the devil poking at you with a pitchfork. It represents a condition. It represents a status. Why? Because every day we wake up, we are in hell. Because this is not our heaven, I'll tell you that. According to Lamentations 2:1, we were cast down from heaven because of the Lord's furious anger, man. We are not in that heightened state that we once used to be in as a glorious people. And now look at what's befallen us, spoken of in Baruch, the 4th chapter, talking about how Jerusalem takes the first person narrative about how her children have been casted off. We are as dung upon the earth. Why? Because our body are still slain in the streets. And guess who gives a damn to actually collect up and talk about it? Nobody. Jarvin has been acting for a lighter sentence and for him to eventually be released from prison sooner than later due to the fact that he doesn't feel him serving 75 years in prison is fit enough for him putting his knee on the man's neck for 8 minutes. He doesn't feel 75 years is the sentence that he deserves, so he's asking for a lighter sentence. Well, you took somebody's life and you were putting more pressure into their neck as time continued to progress and didn't realize that by closing his windpipe and shutting off his breathing, that you'd eventually kill the person. But because of that, and you feel that you're just and asking for a lighter sentence, none of you understand or see that this is the world that we're living in. This is the plight and the predicament of black and Hispanic people, man. We don't talk about it enough because guess what? We become completely numb to it. We forgot how to mourn. We forgot how to lament when someone actually passes. You're supposed to weep sorely and bitterly for your loved ones, man. But you know what we do? We grab the bottle, we smoke weed, we go to social media, we go on Instagram, we scroll, we laugh, we look at memes. We have forgotten completely about the laws of who we are as a people and how to properly and godfully and righteously do things.
Let's bring it out.
Get Baruch 4:1, please, because that scripture divides the line and explains it. Your Christian churches will not teach you a lot of the things that you need to be knowing about. Because when you know Christ, you actually know Christ. When you know Christ, you actually just don't know him by word, by God, by the man written in the scriptures. You'll actually read about him and see that he was an austere man in some certain cases. You read about how he got angry and was flipping tables and kicking people out the damn church.
That's
because
right.
As he said, you turned my father's house into a den of thieves. You never read about that and how he was whipping people. But then you'll just talk about John 3:16, love, and how the commandments are done away with. Well, if the commandments were done away with when he healed that man, when he healed that leper, he wouldn't have told him to go on to the priest. So what was Christ doing in that? Oh, he was keeping and following the commandments. Go ahead and read it.
This is Baruch chapter 4, verse 1. This is the book of the commandments of God, and the law that endureth forever.
The law that what?
And the law that endureth forever.
You know what endure means? It doesn't just mean to continue or stand strong. It means to remain still. It means to remain existent. It means to still be standing. It means the law didn't go anywhere. It's always been here. Why would Abel know to sacrifice animals, which God delights and is more pleased with, than his brother that made the sacrifice of fruits of the ground? But the law hasn't been here. So why did God accept Abel's sacrifice but not Cain's? Keep on reading.
All they that keep it shall come to life.
Shall what?
Shall come to life.
Well, go ahead.
But such as leave it shall die.
And such as never have it will never come to life. You know why? Because that's what's going to allow you to truthfully live apart from spiritually and continuously decaying. He that wandereth out of the congregation of understanding shall remain in the congregation of the dead, says the book of Proverbs. But how many of you are willing to actually come live life and actually come know and read the word, to read about who YHWH HaMashiach truthfully is. But guess what? Because you don't understand or see that or want to know, or because you're so delusioned by the way of church, you wouldn't understand or see that the man that you hear about is so much more different than the man that you read about. He never celebrated holidays that the world does today. That was invented by the traditions of men. Easter, matter of fact, let me touch on Easter. When you look at Easter inside the scriptures and it was being celebrated, that actually was talking about Passover. There's nowhere that we're supposed to celebrate Easter because Easter comes from Ishtar, a goddess that the other nations worship. That was not talking about anything else but Passover, given back in Exodus, the 12th chapter inside the Old Testament, given to Moses, that commanded to be given to the children of Israel. Right? But because you don't understand it, you fail to realize that, or you at least fail to read or open the book, you lose and lack the understanding of not reading what it is that you should be reading. So because we are not understanding these simple things, because we are a hard-headed people as the scriptures describe us to be, and as we are to be, guess what? You then continue to remain in the congregation of the dead. It doesn't mean physical, but it means spiritual and mental. It means you can live life prosperously. You can live life however that it is that you want it. But guess what? You're a dead skeleton within inside yourself, within your very soul. Guess what? It means you're not living as you would actually supposed to be. You know why it's a benefit not to celebrate holidays? Because you save time, money, and stress. God already covered you in the simple little bit right there. You know why he told you his commandments aren't grievous and they're not burdensome? Because when you keep them, you actually live life longer. You know what? God promised one of his faithful and righteous kings, Hezekiah, a guaranteed 15 years on his life because he knew how to pray and where to go to in a time of trouble, man. Could you imagine God giving you an extra 15 guaranteed years on your life and you can't even see the future? Moses said in Psalms chapter 90, it's by a reason of strength we even see 80. 70 he given us because it represents completion. But he said by strength, if it be in God's will, of course, we even see 80 years old, man. You're not guaranteed tomorrow because every single one of you have cancers, poisons, and everything else living within inside you that are dormant and are going to come alive presently within about the next 5 to 10 years. And you're not even guaranteed tomorrow, not even that, the next hour, second, minute, time as it keeps progressing and going by. But then you shouldn't look towards the way that you should go to see what's to come in these last days and time, man. The point of God sending out his prophets, the point of God sending out messengers, the point of God sending out Negroes and Puerto Ricans that look crazy to you is because maybe something that's astonishing to your sight you should pay attention to. You know why? Because it sparks curiosity. You know how simple black people are? When one nigga runs, everybody runs. When one black person does something or one Hispanic does something, everybody follows it. That's right. We set the trend. Y'all don't realize that? When Proverbs 3:31 told you not to envy your oppressor, it's because you're the trendsetter. You set everything else in play, and guess what? The rest of the world follows. That's right. Whether it be on the right-hand side being righteousness or on the left-hand side being wickedness. You are the light in all things and everything. You sag your pants, a white boy will sag his pants. You talk with slang, you talk with that talk, guess what? A white boy that thing. That's right. You do everything like that, guess what? The rest of the world will follow. TikTok is explanatory enough. How much trends do we set and guess what? Everybody else follows. The challenges where you get naked, the challenges where you set the trend for dancing, the challenges where you want to be funny. We set that as a people, not anybody else. Jacob is the former of all things, man. It starts with you because you are chosen to hear from the very foundation of the world. The name YASHARAHLA is engraved in the Lord's hands according to Isaiah 49:16. So when he was creating and making the earth with the palms of his hand, guess who was always there? The nation of Israel. That's right. That's how important you are. That's how precious you are. Much more importantly, this world will not be here without you, man. You got a precept? Go ahead.
This is the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 13. Yo. Ye are the salt of the earth.
Ye are the salt of you know when you season chicken, you have to put seasoning on it. When you season meat, you have to put seasoning on it. Well, guess what? When the Lord created earth, he had to put seasoning on it. Go ahead.
But if the salt has lost its savior, wherewith shall it be salted?
Well, guess what? If the earth wasn't given any flavor, what would this world be like? You imagine anybody else but black and Hispanic people setting trends? What trends do they set? pillaging, raping, killing, murdering, and robbing people? As Christ said in John 10, the thief cometh not but to kill, but destroy, and take everything that's not his? What kind of trend is that? You think the rest of the world can follow along with that? No, because these people that set the trends of dancing, modeling, and everything else is what exactly the world follows after. But if the earth loses its flavor, that being its salt, what would this earth be like? Rhetorically asking, this is what Christ is portraying, showing how important you are, speaking to the Israelites of your significance here upon the earth. Go ahead up.
It is thenceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and to be trodden underneath the foot of men.
So, of course, you can clearly identify the fact that we are trodden underneath the foots of men, because when you read Luke chapter 21, it talks about how until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled, another people would be in your homeland. You know how you know that they're not people? Because they call themselves Jewish. There's nothing Jewish about the Jews in the Bible. So why are you Jewish but you're not a Jew? Why do you do things that pertain and are like the people written of within the scriptures, but yet you can't in any way, shape, or form biblically identify yourself, that being of the 12 tribes of Israel? Or being of that Shemitic lineage, not Semitic, that Shemitic lineage that comes from those 12 ancient patriarchs. Why can't you do that? You know why you can't? Because according to Revelation 2:9 and 3:9, it talks about how in 740 AD, under King Bulon, it talks about how your conversion to Judaism was how you establish yourself as being a Jew. And the Hebrew that's spoken of today is not authentic to how it was spoken of in the time of Moses.
Bring it out.
You added the Nikud, you added this new adoption of how the vowel system is supposed to be pronounced, which is why you have the different pronunciations of Yahweh, Yahuwah, Yohewa, whatever it is that you want to call it. It's not any of those things but the name of Yahweh. Bahasham, in the name of YHWH, his only begotten son. So if we're going to talk about that, we need to talk about what you did almost 1,213 years ago concerning your conversion, and how it is you became a Jew and you're a convert, but you're not the people written of within the scriptures.
That's right.
We need to talk about that because you don't fit a lot of the things written of within the scriptures. You don't fit the description of being on slave ships. You don't fit the description of being the tail and someone else is the head. Because you not only finance the slave trade, you make up a big portion of the world's billionaires. That doesn't sound like being the tail and being at the bottom of society to me. What evil eye you got towards your neighbor? You're rich. You got everything you want. You're in the homeland. You're in the homeland. That's the problem. God said you weren't going to be in the homeland when he returned, but you're in the homeland. Well, you must fit the description of those Gentiles or those heathens that are occupying God's ancient land that are not his people. Well, why is God going to remove you from there if you're his people? Maybe because you're not the people and you're not the people written of within the book.
That's right.
That's why you should read your history. That's why that one man said the Jews left black and they came back white. What happened? Moses in Exodus chapter 4 and 6 to verse 7 had a miracle performed unto him. He had his hand, or his flesh, as the scriptures say, turned into his bosom and took it out, and it became as leprous as snow. Well, if he became leprous as snow, what color or what pigmentation of his flesh had to be if his skin was able to turn white? He must have been a man of color, as this man next to me is, as his brother next to me is. But not a lot of you read that and think to yourselves, those are the people inside the book? When you search upon Google today, anybody pertaining to the Bible, they're all white. Iconoclasm 101, excuse me. But we don't talk about what went on during the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, so on and therefore, pertaining to Christianity, the adoption of everything pertaining to paganism and idolatry underneath the sun. But yet, nobody knows who and what an Israelite is. Nobody even knows the Y-DNA haplotype of Israelites. We say African Hebrew Israelites and African and Israelite are two separate people. They're two separate nations. Ham and Jacob are two separate peoples of two different lines. We're sons of Noah, but we are two different people. Please get that correct. That's the problem with Israel today. We think we're this, we think we're that. That's not the case. If you were this and you were that, there wouldn't be a distinction between Africans and black people. Because Africans don't even consider themselves black people. Because there's 52 different countries in Africa.
That's right.
So which one are you? What's going on, brother? You got a question?
Yeah.
What's up? You just listening?
I'm just listening.
All right, all right. So the point of it is that when you separate the lines of two different peoples, you know they're not the same. So because we're not the same, that must mean what must we be? The sons of God.
This guy needs financial help down here. This guy needs financial help. Not talking. Just don't talk.
Well, why do you think we go out and we do food drives and we began to do so? You can't speak on something and then not know what we're about. Because it's not just pertaining to preaching and teaching, which is the main office of Israelites, but it's also pertaining to the fact that we've gone out and given to the poor. Talking will only get you so far, but actually doing things by the way of deed and action will get you even farther. Get 1 John 3:18. Because a lot of people don't understand the office of Christ and the smaller offices that are compartmentalized within the job and task of doing so. If that's not the case, we talk a lot, but guess what? As Israelites, we also do. That's why he said, keep my commandments. You don't just talk about the commandments of God, you keep them. Go ahead. 1 John 3:18. Because it separates the dividing line between those that like to talk and those that actually like to come out and do things. Go ahead.
This is the book of 1 John, chapter 3, verse 18. My little children, let us not love in word, neither in tongue, but in deed, in truth.
In what?
In truth.
In truth. Indeed and in truth. You know why he said not by tongue or by word of mouth? Because he's separating the fine line between those that like to run their mouths and then those that are actually out there doing something. But because people don't realize and they just look at things from the simple eye point of view, but then don't understand that there's much more offices within the Israelite community than just coming out to teach. Well, guess what? They don't understand that. And guess what then they do? They judge, they don't understand, they don't properly interpret, and guess what? They think that we're just out here running our mouths. That's not the case, man. When you do food drives monthly, when you get back to the poor by the way of clothing, we don't just come out here and teach, but if that was the case, we'd be running our mouths and y'all would feel it. When the job and the offices of those called by Christ, get John 15:16 please, it's to not just go out to the highways and hedges and teach, but go unto those that are poor-minded. Go unto those that are not just poor-minded, but unto the poor as well, and feed them. Matter of fact, get Matthew chapter 10 and verse 6. Because there's other offices within being an Israelite that a lot of people don't understand. They think it's just coming out to teach. They think it's just coming out to run your mouth. They think it's just coming out to yip and yap. Go ahead and read it.
This is John chapter 15, verse 16. Ye have not chosen me, but I have chosen you.
So we're showing you that we're not out here because we want to be. Go ahead.
And ordained you that you should go out and bring forth fruit, and that your fruit should remain. That whosoever ye shall ask of the Father in my name, he may give it to you.
So we're supposed to come out here to bear fruit and that it remain. Much more importantly, it shows you when the vineyard man tends to his garden, he doesn't just plant whatever he's planting within the ground. You know what he does? He tends to it. You know what he does? He makes sure whatever he's got in the ground is growing. He waters it. He makes sure it's in sunlight. But guess what? Everybody just looks at the ground but doesn't understand the process of how everything works. God likened us and his ancient prophets coming out here and teaching unto a harvest. What did he tell his disciples in Matthew chapter 9 and verse 37? The harvest is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray therefore that he would send laborers into his harvest. So guess what? Because a lot of people don't understand it and they just look at the dead naked eye, they don't realize things that go on behind the scenes. Go ahead. Verse 7, verse 6.
This is the book of Matthew, chapter 10, verse 6. But go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel.
So this is the criteria. He's showing you who you're supposed to be going unto and who you're supposed to be preaching unto. Go ahead.
Verse 7. And as ye go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick.
Do what?
Heal the sick.
He didn't say just go teach. He just gave you one instruction. Go unto the people, tell them that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Now he's giving you more criteria before you're officially sent out as ambassadors of Christ. Go ahead.
Cleanse the leper.
Cleanse the lepers.
Raise the dead. Cast out devils. Freely ye have received, freely give.
You can clearly see in what Christ just told us, this is red letter, and what he just said, he wasn't just saying, go out and teach. That's the main office. As a teacher, that's what we're supposed to be doing, but that doesn't disclude everything else that's on the list of things that an Israelite or an ambassador of Christ is supposed to be doing. Why would Paul speak of his work saying, besides teaching, I fed the poor, I healed the sick, I gave them my clothing that they may heal one another? That doesn't make sense. Peter raised Tabitha from the dead. You think that's just teaching? You think it's just one office? Or is it one office compartmentalized and subsided by many other offices underneath the main office? A hegemony, if you will. That's one thing, but yet it's divided into so many other things. He said, heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, and cast out devils. That's 4 things added on top of teaching. So why would you think that it's our job to come out here and just yip yap? When those things are available for us to do, or the opportunity comes, they will gladly be done. We're not those same men, but you could fit the modern day understanding for it to say there's herbs that do certain things that heal you and cleanse you and detoxify your system. That's right. Why? Because you're eating the defiled bread that Ezekiel 4:13 talks about, man. And you're drinking that defiled water also, which contains a lot of BPA and estrogenic chemicals that are making you less masculine as a man. Speaking to the men predominantly because it affects us more than anybody else. But because people lack that understanding and they just look at things from the naked eye, they don't perceive things as they should, or they don't properly come get the explanation and edification that they need to understand who we are and what we out here as ambassadors of Christ do. It wasn't just, ye have chosen me and I have chosen you. On top of that, in sending us out, he told us to do those extra 4 things. But guess what? Because we don't understand and we don't ask questions, just as Christ said, ask and ye shall receive, you don't get the understanding of it. Well, guess what? You remain in the congregation of the dead. Not because you wandered into the way of understanding, but because that's where you choose to remain. You choose to remain there because you choose to remain in darkness, or you choose to remain without light. Well, either way, guess what? You're not coming into the true foundation of understanding that is in Hamashiach Yahawashi. He said, John 8:12, I am the light of the world. He is the one that opens the eyes of the blind. He's the one that can open up your heart from darkness. And he's the one that will most importantly be the light of your life to give you the understanding that you need to live and how you need to do so in these present days and time. Get Isaiah chapter 33 and verse 6.
This is the book of Luke, chapter 14, verse 23. And the Lord said unto the servants, go out into the highways and hedges and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled.
So, this is after, 2 Gospels after Matthew, and this is not just red letter. It's way after Christ told the disciples, go into the cities of the house of Israel and do these things. So you can clearly see what comes first, way before this parable about teaching is even given. Because he told them, I will make you fishers of men. But it doesn't just include teaching. And it doesn't disclude everything else that's on the list pertaining to the criteria of us being the ambassadors of Christ.
Go ahead. This is Isaiah chapter 33, verse 6. And wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy time, and strength of salvation. The fear of the Lord is his treasure. Behold, the valiant ones shall cry without. The ambassadors of peace shall weep bitterly.
So, in that, right, in Isaiah 33 and 6, wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of your times. If you don't have that stability, which represents balance, which represents foundation, then how are you really walking and moving within your life? Well, not as you're supposed to be, not being circumspect, not doing things that you would need to be doing so that you would know how to live in these last days and time, man. There's something I've reiterated always when I talk, because the more closer we get to the end, is that much more closer you need to be watching. The much more closer we get to the end, is the much more you're going to see things get worse before things get better. You've heard people say that before. When it comes to situations, problems, trials within your own life, it gets worse before it gets better. You need to climb and walk through mud and rain and that storm before you can see the sun shine again, man. Get Isaiah 63 and 1. Because this scripture right here is, I want to close with it because a lot of people think that Christ is just a funny and loving guy and, you know, patience, John 3 and 16, God loved the world. A lot of people need to understand this. Go ahead.
This is the book of Isaiah, chapter 63, verse 1.
Bring it out.
Who is this that cometh from Edom with dyed garments from Basra, that is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength? I that speak in righteousness mightily to say, wherefore art thou
in thy apparel, and thy garments like him that treadeth in the wine vat.
You know what it means to tread in wine fat? It means you stomp on grapes. He's not going to be stomping on grapes. That's why his garments are red. He's not coming back to drink and chill. He's coming back with his garments dyed in that color because he's going to be stomping and beating people.
That's right.
That's that rod of iron that's spoken of in Revelation, the 19th chapter, that he's coming back with to smite the nations with. That he's coming back with to smite those that will not submit themselves unto the Israelites. So before I close, come back and wake up, because the man that you think is returning happily, coming to hold hands with everybody, walking in that nice green meadow field, that's not how he's returning. Because Isaiah, the greatest of all the major prophets within the Old Testament, just told you, who is he that cometh from Edom, from Basra, with his garments dyed in red?
No.
And he's coming in great wrath and fury, because the Lord is a man of war, according to Exodus 15:3.
That's right.
So what I suggest for you to do is realize and read the scriptures, because that man coming from Basra is coming back with his garments in red. Not because of wine, but because it's just comparing to show you how much blood will be on his garments and on his apparel for what he will be doing to the nations and what he will be doing to the people that will not submit themselves underneath the nation of Israel when he returns.
People always making noise. Yeah, they think we bluffing.